What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me. As always, my name is Pete Coco. I'm a portrait photographer located in New York, and I want to first thank Fujifilm for sending me a GFX100s2 and a 55-1.7, as well as a 45-100 lens to test out. Now, I had these lenses and this camera for about 2 weeks, and I did a number of portrait sessions with it, and I did some other family photos and stuff like that, and I'm going to tell you all about it today. And I was super impressed with the camera on a lot of levels. So this is not a full review. This is going to be more an overview of the camera itself, but really focus heavily on the images. So hang in there. I'm going to show you a bunch of images. We're going to talk about them, and you're going to see some of the stuff that I did. I was able to use this for a photo shoot with a living legend jazz musician, with a business executive, and then just with family. So I have some cool images to show you. But first, let's talk about handling. Now, the camera is not small, but it's also not large. It's comparable to the size and the weight of a full-frame mirrorless camera. And with the 55 lens in particular, it really is a comfortable size. I was pretty impressed with the size of the camera and how easy it was to hand hold it. It didn't feel like I was dealing with something overly bulky. It has a very deep grip, and it really handled well. Now, the thing that you have to remember, which is a little frustrating for Fujifilm, is that from one camera to a next, or if you're going from an X camera to a GFX camera, buttons, dials are going to be moved around a little bit. So the minute you feel like you've learned the camera layout, they go ahead and change something, which can be extremely frustrating. However, because there's so much customability of buttons, you can more or less get going with a camera, a new Fuji camera, if you're already in the system, with just a little bit of customizing the buttons beforehand. So that's exactly what I did. On this particular camera, I used the little multifunction button, which is right next to the shutter button, to set my film recipes. So I found that to be pretty easy to do. Now, not exactly the same as the way I have my X-T5, for example, set up. It's a little bit annoying. I wish they would just keep consistency, but I understand, at least going from the X system to the GFX system, why things would be a little bit different. It's a completely different system. So I would say, for those of you coming from an X or from an older GFX, you'll have a little bit of a learning curve. There might be some things moved around a little bit, but overall, it didn't take me too long to figure out where everything I needed was. Okay, but like I said, the camera really is a nice size and shape. It fits well in the hand. It didn't feel like it was overly bulky for like handheld shooting. So I don't think you're going to have any problem if you carry it around. Like, I took it into Manhattan. I took it to a bunch of different places, and I never felt like, oh, this is lugging around something big and heavy. Felt about the same or comparable to my Canon R5. All right, so let's talk about one of the biggest things we always talk about for Fujifilm: autofocus. Now, I tested one of these just for like 10 minutes at a Fuji X Summit event in New York a couple of weeks ago, maybe like a month ago at this point. And I was a little bit put off by the autofocus performance because it just was hunting. And even for a steady portrait with someone right in front of me, it missed the eye a little bit. It focused on the nose. And so I really had pretty low expectations for the autofocus speed when I tried out this particular camera. But I was surprised because it was better than I expected it to be. The camera, obviously, compared to a full frame camera, is slow, but it is a medium format camera. But I used it for some run and gun type stuff. The autofocus worked great. I was surprised by how good it was. Now, again, it's not going to be fast in comparison to those of you who want to compare it to like a Sony or a Canon, but it was accurate and it didn't miss. And I didn't have a ton of photos where the nose was in focus and the eye wasn't. I was really impressed by it, but maybe it was because I had such low expectations. If you've never used a GFX camera, this one is definitely faster than the older ones, but there is still sort of a lag. So when you focus, right, it autofocuses. It does that pretty quickly, and it gets the subject in focus. And then you press the shutter button, and then you feel like you wait a second, and it's like, kerplunk, here's your image. But now we are talking about 100 megapixel medium format files. Don't expect it to be as fast as, say, a Canon R5, which is the other camera I use. After using it for a few days, I just felt like it's a portrait photographer's dream camera because of the images. So that's basically all I want to talk about when it comes to the handling and when it comes to the autofocus, just to give you a broad overview. For me, the work that I do, I found it to be super sufficient. It worked great. I had nothing to complain about. All right, so let's get to the heart of the matter, the image quality. So this was with the 55-1.7 shot wide open, because of course I love to do that. And check out the beautiful creamy bokeh. And this particular file I adjusted, but and all I did was just kind of lift the shadows, bring in the blacks, and then just pumped up the contrast a little bit, and I maybe went overboard. So let's undo a little bit of that. But I'll often do this with my raw files, because if you import it in Capture One, it'll automatically have the film sim applied. So like here's Reala Ace applied. You can take that off and put it back to Provia if you want, or any film sim if you want, but it applies it. And so you can adjust from the film sim, which I think is super cool. But again, if we zoom in on this handlebar, you just have an incredible, like a stupid amount of detail, like more detail than anyone actually needs, right? Look, 400%, and you could still see detail. 200%. You could see the individual strands of fiber coming off of that handlebar. So there's a beautiful amount of detail. This is not the most important thing by far, though, so we're going to get to that. Now, you wouldn't be a Fuji user if you didn't take a picture of a bike just leaning against a wall. But now here's the same thing. The more important thing for me is dynamic range, right? So dynamic range, and there's another thing I'll talk about in a minute. But here, I really was able to like pull back all of that sky detail. Check it out. So at 0, if the highlights are at 0, there's some detail in the sky, but all you have to do is slide this slider back, and you can really get back all of that detail. And then I like to lift the shadows just a touch, right? So here's the shadows at 0. And so I'll lift them just a little bit, and then I'll pull in the blacks. And then sometimes I'll actually go to the curves, and I'll pull in the levels, I should say, and I'll pull in some of the blacks and some of the highlights and some of the darks. But the colors are beautiful. It really is beautiful. Here's one of a leaf. I went to Nature Preserve, took some shots, and again, just a beautiful amount of detail. Now, here's where I focused, and you could see shooting, I shot this at f4, and you can see, like exactly where the focus hit. Still very shallow, even at f4. So you can see these individual leaf fibers are in focus, and then even the stem is out of focus, which is pretty cool. Here, same thing. If I wanted to, I can pull back a lot. Now, I purposely overexposed this because I liked it being backlit like that. And then if I were to adjust this, I would even do something like this, like give it more of like a high key look. But you really have so much you can do with these files. Here's another one. Same thing. Tons of detail. Check that out. And it's not just the detail. The bokeh is beautiful, or bokeh if you prefer, is beautiful. You have just such a, I don't know how else to describe it except like a 3D or sort of a filmic look to things. Like here, you can see how the background is just blurred out beautifully. The subject is isolated, and it really does pop off of the background, but it doesn't look fake. It still has a real look to it. And again, these are all in Reala Ace, which so far I've really, really enjoyed using. I think that that might be my new favorite film sim, although Acros has really been what I love. Now, next I want to show you some branding photos I did for this business gentleman. And this was taken at the beach, and I had an umbrella with a flash to force light into the shadows here. So this was with one light off camera, and this was the 45 to 100 lens. And again, this was just raw Provia, and I did some adjusting here as well. But look at the amount of dynamic range you have. Like, you can pull in all of that sky, like really pull it in if you want that 3D dramatic look, which is what I wanted for these. And then you can, if you pump up the contrast just a touch, it really makes it like almost like larger than life, the images. You could see the focus hit his eye perfectly. Everything is beautifully in focus. There's so much detail, and there's so much not just adjustment range and the dynamic range, but you could see it almost has a 3D look to it. Here's another one. Same thing. I had this guy standing in Manhattan. Obviously, this is Times Square. And the camera did a great job tracking his eye, focusing on him. I had him moving around a little bit. And it really did a wonderful job. Everything is super sharp, really nicely in focus. And the subject separation is just beautiful. This was, again, with the 45 to 100 lens. So you really have this subject separation that's just beautiful. And it's, again, almost like looking at real life. That's how 3D it looks. Now, the best shoot that I did with this camera is I was really honored to photograph Ron Carter, who's a living jazz legend. And Mr. Carter invited me to his home to take some portraits of him. I'm just going to show you a couple of these, which I also use the GFX for. And here's one where all I did for this is I just lifted the shadows. So I shot this underexposed. Like, let me show you the original, right? And I cropped it a little bit. So I purposely shot it underexposed so I wouldn't lose a detail. But even if I raise the exposure by like half a stop, you still are preserving a ton of detail. You still can pull out the shadows, like that's too much, but you can pull them out as much as you want. You can still retain the highlights. You can put the blacks in to give it a little bit more drama so you don't lose all that drama. And check it out. So this is like a simple way that I will adjust a photo that I'm not doing a ton of work to it. And then this one, I shot it a little bit wide, and I sort of like the like a 2x3 crop for it. So I just zoomed in just a little. I wanted him more or less on this side of the frame, cropped it, and check it out. Tons of detail, so much detail. Beautiful amount of detail. The colors are beautiful. Here again, the subject separation. And this was with the 55-1.7. And I'll show you one more. Here's another one of Mr. Carter. And here I used an umbrella, like a medium-sized Photek soft lighter umbrella, which was camera left. And I photographed with the same, this was with the 45 to 100 lens at 45 f4, and check out again the detail and the separation. Okay, so I just wanted to give you an overview, show you some images. Again, this was not a full review, just my initial first impressions on using the camera. So what do I think at this point? Well, I mean, I think the camera is awesome, and I think that the GFX, what it gives you is this larger than life files, literally large file sizes, but the images, not just, it's partially the Fuji colors, which are always beautiful, and then it's partially the amount of dynamic range you have to edit the files. So if you need to pull out shadows, if you need to put in highlights, if you need to do a lot of editing or even a little editing, the files really retain everything for you, an incredible amount of detail. Even if you push the files hard, like you can do a lot with these files. And then the third thing is they really have this closer to reality look to them. So I keep saying 3D. I don't know a better way to describe it, but the subject really pops off from the background without it looking weird or fake or digital. For me, I feel like the files really have this more realistic creaminess to them that goes beyond full frame and clearly beyond Fuji's X mount cameras, which, you know, have the crop sensor. And the other thing is, for $5,000, sure, that's a lot of money for a camera, but for a medium format camera, it's actually a really great value. All right, so that's really all I have for you today. Again, this wasn't a full review, just wanted to give you an overview, show you some images. I really loved using this camera. It's on my short list now. Those of you who follow my channel know that I've been thinking about getting a GFX. I almost bought an original 100, and then they announced this camera that I just talked about, so I held off on it, and I'm still making that decision. But leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. I'd like to thank Fujifilm once again for sending me the camera and lenses to try out, and I would like to thank B&H, who's been a great affiliate for me and a great sponsor for me. So if you're looking to buy any of this stuff, if this video has helped convince you to buy something, please use my links in the description below, preferably the B&H links. And here's wishing you guys an awesome day. Go out and take some great pictures. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.